Aloy is coming soon to the world of Genshin Impact. And in this video, based off of some of her abilities in Horizon Zero Dawn, I wanted to discuss and build a kit for her and how she's going to perform while remaining different from Ganyu and Diona as her cryo bow counterparts. Before we get into Aloy's kit that I come up with, I thought of some of her abilities and basically who she is as a character in the game of Horizon Zero Dawn. Aloy is a survivalist and she's very good at killing things. So her kit revolves around a main DPS kit for the most part. So I give her an ability that can function off the field, but for the most part, she wants to remain on the field, but also not be taking so much damage. But if she does take some damage, there'll be some effects to go along with that. For Aloy's elemental skill, I thought of a couple different things that maybe miHoYo will do for her. The first one is, if you haven't played the game, she has 3 different types of bows that you can unlock, and they have a lot of different arrows, so a hard utility kind of thing. And which is why I'm kind of disappointed that she's only cryo, because the cryo arrows aren't even on the original bow you get. So you have 3 bows. You have the hunter bow, the sharp shot bow, and the war bow. The hunter bow has fire arrows, hardpoint arrows, hunter arrows. The sharp shot bow has the harvest arrow, the precision arrow, and the tear blast arrow, and the war bow has the more of the elemental arrows, which is the corruption arrow, the freeze arrow, and the shock arrow. My other option for her elemental skill is when you activate it, you have increased crit rate and damage for, let's say, 5 seconds or until you get interrupted. So if you get hit when you activate the skill, you lose your increased crit rate and crit damage. The skill description would go a little something like this. By utilizing Aloy's focus earpiece, she can see the weak points of enemies easier, which allows her to get increased damage and crit rate. For Aloy's elemental burst, I was thinking of her whistle feature and the call mount, where she can call a machine to help aid her as like a kind of like an Oz for Fischl, but something that when it's summoned can apply a debuff to the enemy by lowering res of physical and cryo, or just overall resistance, or apply like a bleed where like you just have like some tick damage. And for this elemental burst, you can also switch off of Aloy, and then the mount will still be fighting on the field, because in game, if you have a mount with you and you're fighting one of the bigger machines, the mount will actually help fight for you, and it'll take some of the aggro off of the bigger machine from you, because they'll probably kill your poor little mount that you called. Next are what I came up with for Aloy's ascension passives. As a sniper stealth killer Aloy is in game, I was thinking if she gets below a certain HP threshold, her movement speed will increase to help get her away from the action and into a better spot for her to keep dishing out some damage. For the second ascension passive, I was thinking of giving her additional crit rate on enemies with lower health, because in the game you can pretty much shoot off very specific and pieces of a machine, whether it be like armor plates or horns or even like gas tanks and other pieces, just stripping the machines down really. And I feel like, in order to help kill, other enemies where hilly churl, if it's like under like 50 health, you have increased crit rate, so you can keep hitting those consistent damage shots so it'll finally go down. Lastly will be our utility passive, which I can assume is probably gonna be something along crafting lines, because crafting is pretty important in Horizon Zero Dawn, as you can craft arrows, even mid-fight, you can craft potions, traps, all sorts of kinds of things. Or the other one I thought of would be like a movement speed buff, kind of like Rosaria, but little bit different, maybe like increased movement speed in the daytime, just to have that reverse effect for Rosaria's movement speed. But I would assume the crafting one is probably the more highly likely thing to happen. And for her ascension, what she ascends with would be crit rate, because I really wanted to focus her kit around overall damage consistency. Lastly, let's talk about what I came up with for Aloy's constellations based off of the kit I came up with for her. and hopefully we even get constellations that are grindable based off of some event, probably in version 2.2, because that's when Aloy is going to be available for all versions of the game and not just PlayStation versions and accounts first. C1, increased damage on shielded enemies, and when the shield is destroyed or reset on the elemental skill cooldown. Constellation 2 grants a multi-shot every 10 seconds when activating the elemental skill that does 50% of the original arrow, which can be normal or charged, so her kit can not only be charged only, and you can probably try to do a normal attack build for her, which could be cool as well. And I was just trying, if you notice in Horizon, you can knock more than one arrow onto the bow, which I think is a really cool feature. This will help with Aloy's overall damage, and while tying it to the activation of one of her elemental skills, which is already part of her kit, which will hopefully grant it less awkward than manually knocking multiple arrows as you do within Horizon Zero Dawn. Constellation 3 is your skill up. Constellation 4, I went to buff her elemental burst, so I'll give it increased time on the field, so the mech that she calls will last a little bit longer, and will grant the party, including herself, an increased attack damage of 20%, just to give a little bit more support capability to Aloy's kit if you don't want to keep her out on the field as a main DPS, which is what I was hoping to accomplish for her, since she's the only thing you gotta play in Horizon Zero Dawn, and obviously if she's not doing damage, then you're probably not killing these big machines. Constellation 5 is, again, your skill up. Constellation 6, I would thought of a sniper fantasy, where after each enemy killed, your next charge shot will deal an additional 150% critical damage, which will hopefully help you deal enough for the next enemy to also then get your charge shot back with increased damage. And if you combo that, stack it with your elemental skill, you'll have a more crit rate, so hopefully your crit damage will actually activate. I think it would be super cool if I got any of this kit close to what miHoYo decides to do for Aloy when she actually gets released and when she comes to live. But I really hope that they kind of have her be pretty accurate to how she kind of functions in Horizon Zero Dawn, because they're pretty good when they released Asuka and Honkai as the first major collaboration character, and now we have Fischl, who basically is also very good and pretty true to how she functions in Genshin. And I'm hoping that they don't make her like bad, because people are like, oh, it's gonna be a free 5-star, there's no way miHoYo is gonna make her actually decent. But I don't think they'll do that, because if I had the option to get a character in game, I really would not want it to be bad. Because if they'd be like, oh, here, let's do a collaboration, but your character is going to be very not viable in terms of overall strategy and team competence in the game, so when you get her, she's not going to be very effective. And I'd be kind of bummed out if it was me getting a character like that. So I don't see them making Aloy bad, and I really think it'd be cool if they have somewhat of this kit for her to make her different than our two cryo bow users that we have already, like aforementioned Ganyu and Diona, because Ganyu really holds a big meta spot in the cryo bow field, and Diona is a pretty good support if you need that on Inspiral Abyss, where you want to bring shields and have a little bit of healing. Diona also does that, so making Aloy different than both of them while still remaining viable is going to be tricky thing that miHoYo has to deal with. Overall, I'm hoping for a really cool character, because this is one of my favorite games. It was my first platinum trophy that I ever got, which is I don't know if it's saying much, because it wasn't super hard to get per se, but it was really fun growing through the story of this game, getting to see Aloy grow as a character from start to finish, and I can't wait for the next game. So I am hyped, and I'm really pumped that she's our first collaboration character, in Genshin with a hope of more to come. And with that, thanks for checking out the video, and I hope you have a wonderful day.